All right, I went back and forth on this a little bit, debating on whether or not I should talk about this story, but I figured that it might possibly be doing a disservice to the general world and possibly myself to not talk about it. And there's an important lesson to be had here, like in most things. So I figured that also for personal archiving, I'll talk about it because I will eventually probably not forget about it, but I might forget some of the details. So I just want to talk about it anyways. And the topic of today is drugs. Drugs are interesting. I'm not a stoner, Mom, I swear to God. So I guess I'll just start at a random point in the story. I have to go back a little bit. So for context, prior to my 21st birthday, I had not done any sort of drug ever. I'm past 21, for those who are aware and keeping track. But I had never drank alcohol. I have never smoked anything, done any drug or whatever that wasn't prescribed to me specifically for some sort of illness. Which I think is kind of interesting that I've gone so long in my life without having any sort of encounter, both first-hand experience or like second-hand, I guess. None of my family is really drinkers, my extended family a little bit, nor do they use drugs of any sort or smoke tobacco or anything like that. And then when I was at university, I went 4 years not drinking anything, and I was never using or on anything, nor was I ever offered anything, which I think was kind of odd, that I feel like most people that have gone in their life have at least been offered something once before. And this was like a scare tactic maybe that I was taught in elementary school, that say no to drugs, but I've never had to say no to drugs or yes to drugs at all, because no one has ever approached me about it. Whatever I've been doing in life, it's been working, so I'm going to keep rolling with that. I guess it's the anime t-shirts that turn them away. So that's just the context of it. Personal opinion on drug, it's all right if you're a user. I don't really give a shit. There are certainly some benefits to be had about that. I didn't sing the same tune of a while ago, and not, that is to say, like not even a month ago, but I had a bit of a change of heart. I had a personal experience with it, and I think it's interesting that I reserve such an opinion still, despite the experience that I had that I'm going to get into in a little bit. But I guess that's just the context of the story, that I'm not really a person who's into that, nor do I deal with that on a regular basis. Another thing to note is that I do live in a legal state for marijuana. I live within a mile of like 5 shops, I think, or dispensaries, I guess you should say. And it just isn't my thing. Same thing with alcohol, that I turned 21. Since that day, like the thought crossed my mind a couple times that, hey, maybe I could go get something. And it wasn't until like literally a month ago that I actually went to the store to buy something. And it was only one occasion, because before that, like the thought would be like, hey, I could just easily walk into a fucking store, buy whatever that I want, and then get drunk, right? And the idea was interesting to think about, that I was legally able to do something, but it wasn't as, I didn't have a motivation to do so other than to say like, hey, I will drink alcohol for some purpose that I don't understand yet. So the reasoning behind it was somewhat ambiguous to me, not having any personal experience with it, nor really understanding the appeal of it. I tend to like to keep a level head in most things, and I'll get into that in a little bit, or at least relatively speaking, untampered with mind. I like to keep myself in. But yeah, it was up until a couple months ago that I actually did drink. I went to a store, and it was the most surreal experience ever. It was actually a specialty alcohol shop, and I just like walked in because I was specifically looking for Sapporo Ichiban, which is a Japanese beer. And of course, that'd be the first thing I ever drank. And the reason I wanted to do this was because a character I'm quite fond of in Idolmaster Cinderella Girls, Takagaki Kaede, whose seiyuu is Hayami Saori, who is probably my seiyuu waifu because she also voices Yukino Shita Yukino, who is my main waifu. But anyways, tangent. Takagaki Kaede is one of the few idols in Idolmaster Cinderella Girls who is legally above the age to drink. She is 25 years old. Legal drinking age in Japan is 20 for those who are unaware. But she is often depicted with alcohol in hand. It's kind of like a character trait of hers. It's like I'm looking at this, and then I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna just go to the store. I'm gonna see if I find a Sapporo Ichiban, since it's the whatever the big beer brand of America is to Japan. I don't know, it's like fucking Bud Light or something over there. I don't know, dude. I don't know anything about this shit. But I went to go specifically find this because I looked online and it said this shop had it. So I went in there and I was walking around, because it felt like I didn't belong there and people were just looking at me because I had no fucking clue what I was doing. I've never drank anything before in my life. I ended up having to ask one of the employees. I find it, and then I also grab a couple of other items just out of curiosity. And it was so weird because at the register I wasn't even carded either, and I'm like 130 pounds. And also I look relatively young. comparatively, that I figured that they would card me. But I guess at that point, if you were buying like $40 worth of alcohol or something, and you had the balls to walk up to the register, I guess they just figured like, fuck it. This guy is at a specialty shop. He doesn't give a shit. That weekend, I tried beer for the first time, which I didn't like at all. I tried a couple other things, and with the intention of getting drunk, but I did not quite reach that. I just ended up getting a little bit doozy, I think, and kind of tired. But anyways, that was kind of a side tangent. And to build up to this, the main event here, which is the usage of a drug. I'm not going to specifically say which drug it was, but it was something that you can obtain legally over the counter or through Amazon.com and have it shipped straight to your house with no one being the wiser. It was actually 2 weeks ago was the first time I used it. I took a relatively low dosage of it. The first experience I had was kind of mild. I didn't really find anything significant about the experience that I had, nor did I experience things that other people said they did. It mostly just made me feel like I was drunk, which was weird because a lot of other people said that it made them feel more hyper or more hyperactive, I guess. And I felt the exact opposite of that. It just made me feel kind of doozy, and I ended up getting tired and fell asleep. So then I was like, well, next week I'm gonna try more. I'm gonna go a little bit deeper into this shit. I did my reading. I was familiar with what the certain effects of it were, what I should expect from it. All the documentation and shit about it, whatever. Like, I kind of knew what to expect, and I knew that what certain things can happen with it, but I was like, yeah, I have made an informed decision. I want to check this out simply for the experience of it, and also like as an escape, because I think that's ultimately a lot of the reason why people indulge within such things like drugs or alcohol or whatever, like even anime as well, that they offer some sort of an escape, that it will force your body into a different headspace for momentarily at least, or you can try to forget other things that are weighing on your mind, or you can just use it as a way to take flight. I was like, yeah, dude, this is what I want. I'm going to check this out. So on the weekend that I did try to go a little bit deeper into this shit, I took a higher dosage of said drug and was off to the races. I was in the mood for it, and I was ready. I had stuff, and I was in my room upstairs, and like I had a piss gallon. I was prepared to like get kind of fucked up. But what ended up happening with this specific drug, and I think as soon as I mention this, some people will know exactly what I was doing, but it makes you nauseous at a certain point. And I kind of expected this to happen, and I had some like homemade remedies or whatever, and I was also taking a certain other drug to this to hopefully counteract that. Didn't really matter, still made me nauseous. I ended up vomiting like an hour or an hour and a half into the taking of it, and it was not a pleasant experience, let me tell you, because I haven't really had much experience vomiting in my life. It's not something that's happened to me frequently. I think like the last notable time it happened to me was like more than 5 years ago. So I kind of forgot what it was like, and I also forgot how fucking disgusting it was. I ended up vomiting, and I'm like, well, shit, I guess this is the end of that. The problem was, like, as soon as I was doing that, I think like one of my parents was up and like went to the bathroom or some shit, and as I was in the middle of vomiting, it was only like 2 hurls or something, so it wasn't that bad. And I'm far up here, so I don't think they really heard too much, but they thought I was like having a cough or some shit. And they're like, hey Parzi, are you okay up there? And like in between hurls, I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And by that point, I was already like sobering up fast. The beginning onsets of it, I was just feeling kind of dizzy again, like feeling drunk again, essentially. Though I can't really speak as a whole about that because, like when I did try to drink alcohol, I got to a certain point, but I wouldn't say I was drunk. I was still like relatively there, and I was not that like out of it. But then again, what do I know? So after this moment, I was like, shit, dude, now I want to wait, because I didn't want to go immediately back down, because for all I knew, the parent who woke up was still like downstairs in the bathroom or some shit, or decided to stay up to see if I started quote unquote coughing again. So I ended up sitting in my room for like 15-20 minutes, paranoid as fuck and sobering up fast as fuck, with a mouth full of like vomit aftertaste, and like the bile of my stomach was just, it was just everywhere. I had the windows open though, but like the smell still lingered. It's a very potent smell, let's say. And luckily I had a little bit of water, but I eventually ran out after rinsing my mouth a little bit. And I'm like, dude, I need to fucking wash my mouth and face and shit. This is disgusting. eventually, I think whoever was downstairs was went to sleep. We have cameras in our house, and one of them's pointing outside. So I logged into the thing. I was trying to see if I could, in the reflection of the glass or some shit, that I could see if the lights were on. Didn't fucking work. A useless piece of shit cameras. But anyways, like I ended up going downstairs, and like I felt like a fucking spider climbing downstairs. It took me at least 2 or 3 minutes to get down the stairs without making a noise. Usually the stairs going downstairs are fairly noisy. This time, I went with the utmost care. Like I said, I literally felt like a spider because I was still kind of fucked. I just didn't realize it yet. So I went down, and I said it was like one of the most sobering experiences of my life going down those stairs, because like I was paranoid out of my fucking mind that I was gonna get down there and like what someone was gonna be up, or someone was gonna be in the bathroom, and I would have to answer to them. So what ended up happening is that no one was downstairs. It was perfectly fine. Everybody was sleeping. I was just having baseless paranoia, but paranoia nevertheless. I'm usually in a state of paranoia, and that will become important in a little bit. I ended up washing my face and taking a piss and brushing my teeth like 3 times, and it was probably the most refreshing moment in the world. So like after that, I ended up sneaking back upstairs, or I got more water first, and I needed to rehydrate myself. I get upstairs, I just turn off my PC, and I'm like, well, so much for that shit. I was planning on getting into something, getting into a different headspace, and like laying around and watching some shit on TV or like YouTube or something. I had Digimon Tamers on. I was gonna watch that. All plans went out the window. No music, no YouTube, no games. Just decided to wind down because I was already feeling sober, and I was also feeling kind of tired, excessively tired. So I was like, yeah, fuck it, go to sleep. So like before I go to sleep, laying in bed just watching some YouTube, I put on some Seres Fauna ASMR, who I listen to frequently to get to sleep, but also just to relax. Just put some on. And about the vomit, so I had 2 grocery bags up here, double bagged, and I vomited into the bag. During the course of the night, I just had the bag tied up because I was too paranoid to take it downstairs. Luckily, my upstairs room is quite large, and I have like a weird closet thing in the corner that I don't have clothes or anything in. So I put it in there and close the door because that closet is also unfinished, so I don't give a shit. So I put it in there, and I'm like, I'll take it out in the morning or something. I didn't want to risk going outside because I felt like if I did that, someone would know for sure, so I'll just do it in the morning. So I did that. I ended up laying in bed listening to some VTube e-girl ASMR, and it was comfy as hell, but like I was already tired. So I listened to like a minute and then went to sleep. And this is where shit starts to hit the fan. And I want to introduce a story. And this one is by the Venerable Ben Saint. You know the one. And this was a story from the PCP podcast. I don't exactly remember which episode it was, but it was a story about the first time he got high smoking weed. And I think some people, at least like dedicated listeners of the PCP, like the old fags like me, will know what I'm referring to here. There was a story, and this one has stuck in my head for a while because of the reason why it resonated with me a lot, even back then. But in this story, Ben goes to someone's house, some people that he's not necessarily familiar with. They all smoke weed, they all get high, and he feels like he gets fucking trapped in there, not only because he's surrounded by people that he doesn't necessarily like, but he gets into a headspace of being high, and he's no longer able to get out of that high. So he feels double trapped by the people in location around him, that like he can't drive home or walk home himself because he's in an altered state, but also because he's trapped in the altered state, and he might like you just can't get out of it. And this was one of the reasons I used to point to and be like, this right here is why I never want to get high or drunk or whatever in my life, because I feel like if I get into such a headspace, my paranoia will take over, or just my my obsession over being a control freak on every aspect of my life would just completely overtake me, and just create this terrible cyclical paranoid freak out moment. And this is kind of what ended up happening, but I'll like set the stage a little bit. So despite vomiting, and what I presume to be vomiting up the things, and despite feeling significantly more sober than I had ever been before in my life, much to my dismay, within like an hour and a half after going to sleep, I wake up in a cold sweat. And this is probably one of the scariest moments in my life, bar none. Like imagine, when you were a kid, or maybe even now, like when you have a fever dream and you just have nightmares when you have a fever, or it's because of the medication that you're taking. I don't know exactly the specifics. Some people are smarter than me out there and will know exactly why this is the case. It's happened to me a couple times before, 2 significant that I remember a lot. One of them because I woke up in a state, I didn't necessarily sleepwalk, but I ended up walking to the kitchen and was like digging through the pots and pans and shit and mumbling some crazy shit, and my dad woke me up once. After the fact, I knew what I was doing, but this one's a little bit different. Like, I woke up, but I didn't wake up. I was like in a fever dream. And it wasn't until a little bit later that I actually sort of came to. I messaged one person after this fact, and I wrote down in my own personal notes and shit. This is exactly what I put. I say, holy shit, I'm back. Because after this moment, like after going to sleep, some crazy shit happened, and I felt like I was in like 3 different layers of a fever dream. You know that moment in Serial Experiments Lane when there's those kids and they're playing that one game called Phantoma, and in that game, like people are there and they get trapped in it or whatever. I don't remember exactly the sub story, but it's this weird maze that you can't really get out of, and Lane isn't there. Dude, that's where I felt like I was trapped in.
ここはワイヤーの正面だぞ。なんでこんな。待って、逃げないで。
Except like 3 different layers of it, and it would just never end, and it was this dark and shit, and like everything was crazy, and like even when I woke up I felt like I wasn't up yet. I was profusely sweating, tossing, turning. It felt awful, and I could have sworn, dude, I could swear that I saw my life flash before my eyes, that there were some memories in there that like I was just seeing and shit, and it was crazy. So I ended up waking up at, let's see here, at around 4:50 in the morning. I say, holy shit, I'm back, because that's the moment I regain consciousness, so to speak. And what ended up happening is that whatever the drug that I took, despite vomiting it up and despite knowing that this could possibly happen, I ended up waking up in the middle of it. So I ended up experiencing the climax of the high as I woke up, and I was not prepared for this, nor was I expecting this. And this was the problem with, or perhaps a mistake on my end, a miscalculation, if you will, that you should understand the consequences of getting high before getting high. And it is a fact that regardless of what happens when you're in this high, you're in this high and you won't ever get out of it. Let's say, I don't know, you smoke some weed or you drop a tab of acid or something, and then like 2 hours later when you're like kind of in the middle of it, like you get a call or something from a family member that you need to go out and do something immediately because there's been an emergency. You're kind of trapped in that, or just not as extreme of a situation as that, but let's say like you get fucking hungry and you want to go make some shit and you're like high off out of your mind. What the hell are you supposed to do? And this is something that you don't, or I personally didn't take into account, and it's something I should have remembered from the story of Ben Saint, that once you get in this, dude, you're fucking trapped in there. And I was scared out of my mind when I woke up because it felt like I wasn't up. I legitimately felt like I died, and I fought to get back to my body because the type of, I'm just going to say it was a dissociative. So it certainly kicked in pretty hard in a moment when I wasn't expecting it. It honestly felt like, now that with the hindsight, I'm able to describe it as being raped. For example, there's such thing as consent versus no consent, obviously. Whereas if you're having a consensual, intimate moment with someone, then it feels good because you're both into it and you're both expecting it. But let's say you wake up in the middle of the night and someone is riding you. You're going to wake up and feel like you're getting raped. It's not going to feel like you're feeling good, even if you technically are. It's just a matter of fact that you're not expecting that at that moment, and you just wake up in the middle of that shit. And with this specifically, like, it was fucking trippy as hell because I woke up and I felt like I didn't have my body and I had to fight to get back to it. Like I was in Serial Experiments Lane, I was in Phantoma. Like I was just going through the maze and I would get to my body and then I would just immediately go back into a feverish daze and like completely lose track of shit for a while. I walked to my chair at some point. It was too much for my head. I was like really fucking dizzy. So I went back to my bed and all I could do was sit on the edge of my bed with my knees curled up, like almost in a fetal position. And like all I could do, I couldn't sit up straight. I couldn't lay down in bed because I felt like I would fall asleep and slip back into that shit again, and who fucking knows what would happen. So like I just sat there on the edge of my bed in almost a fetal position, just freaking the fuck out, not exactly knowing what I was doing, and also terrified that, yep, I'm going to be in this state for like the next hour or so. And thank God I did it on a day when I don't have any real responsibilities in the morning. And the entire time, like I just whipped out my phone. I started typing shit into my notes. It looked like a fucking schizo was writing in there. It was probably, like I said, one of the scariest moments of my life, that I was fully not prepared for such a thing to happen. And I kind of experienced the opposite of what a lot of people said. And it wasn't a stimulant. It was definitely a sedative. Maybe that's just my body. Maybe it's the dosage. Maybe I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, never listen to people on Reddit, something like that. I ended up just sitting on, like I said, on the edge of my bed. I turned on the light and I typed random shit into my notes. I just swipe between apps and shit. Like, I didn't really remember what I was doing. I was just trying to keep myself tethered. I didn't want to lose track of something. So I was just, on my phone, I was just looking at something, trying to focus on something. Because if I turned off that light, dude, it would be all over. I forgot to mention, too, when I woke up for the first time, my room is really dark. I got a couple blankets over the windows. I have no lights in here when I'm sleeping, sun blocking curtains, all that good stuff, which is usually based and comfy for during the day, but not when you wake up in a delirious state like this, that like I woke up and I didn't know up from down. It was like I was underwater or something crazy. Definitely not a good experience. It was definitely a fault of my own. I'm not going to avoid pointing a finger at blame here, but it was perhaps because of this mistake that I was able to learn from it and make this video here. The following day, I just ended up waking up at like 10 o'clock or something. Barely slept, maybe like an hour or two. Too fucking paranoid to do that shit. I just sat down, drank some tea, had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the morning, and like I took a picture of it. I might put it up on screen, and I'm like, dude, I legitimately felt like I'm so glad to be alive right now, because last night it felt like if I didn't focus enough, I might not be here anymore. And this is when the whole idea of me being a control freak kicks into gear, that because of this altered state of consciousness and because of all the shit I put my body through, that I forgot that I am someone who likes to be in control of a lot of things. I like to micromanage my life. Because I've never been high, I didn't have a point of reference for this, but I finally realized it despite the, where my head was, in a relative mental state of sobriety after the fact of when I woke up and when I was trying to keep myself fucking tethered to reality, it felt. And not dissociate further, I realized that being trapped in that high was quite possibly one of the worst experiences that I've felt in a very long time. That I didn't have control over it. I wanted to go to sleep. I didn't want to feel that again. I wish I never consumed the substance. And at the end of the day, I just came to the conclusion that, dude, I'm not fucking with this shit again. Threw everything out. Also threw out the vomit bag at like 5 o'clock in the morning in the middle of that shit when I started to come down much more and I was able to like focus. It was some crazy shit, dude. So I guess the point of this is that I'm never doing drugs again, and I think this should be a sort of fair warning for a lot of people who get curious about these things, that there are definitely some downsides to it that might not necessarily be talked about a lot, but you should take a careful look at yourself in the mirror and assess like what kind of person you are. Are you someone who likes control or someone who wants to relinquish that control for something better? Do you want to be taken somewhere by someone, or do you want to take the lead yourself? And I'm someone who, perhaps I took my agency for granted. I was like, you know what? I do like to be in control, but it might be fun to let something else drive for a change. And when I did let that thing drive, it didn't take me places that I wanted to be in times when I wanted to do so. But regardless, I think that even if I did take it during the day, I would still be lying in a puddle of sweat like 2 hours later feeling like shit. The reason I make this video is to like share my experience of that it's not all fun and games. Despite there being people making memes and shit of this, you should definitely be careful out there, and it's not for everybody. You're not necessarily going to feel the same things that everybody else does, and that's why I remember that story from Ben Saint, and it's more true than ever now, and now my story might be that for someone else. You're relinquishing your control and submitting yourself to some sort of confinement, this place that you're going to send yourself to. The substance won't leave your body for a certain amount of time. So whether you like it or not, you're going to be stuck in there. If you have a bad trip, you're going to be tripping in that mental nightmare for a little bit, depending on the length of the time that drug has, or the half-life or whatever in your body. At the end of the day, I guess I'm just going to continue to abuse caffeine. That certainly is a drug, I won't deny that, but it's definitely something that's not going to fuck me up that bad. I guess the last thing I do want to say is that in the lucidity following actually coming back and trying to keep myself tethered, I remembered Madarame Harunobu, and I asked myself, would those otaku do the same shit I'm doing to myself right now? Yes, they drink copious amounts of alcohol, and yes, in the NHK novel, there is moments when Sato and Kaoru do get on some stuff. I haven't read the NHK novel though, so I can't really mention on that. But like the thing that I kept reminding myself of is like, maybe I just made a huge mistake. It was in a moment of weakness that I decided to purchase these things, because I felt that the idea of disassociating and forcing myself to be in such a state would be a way to take me somewhere else and escape from the monotony and the difficulty of the current grind that I'm in life. In that moment of weakness, I forgot my ideals, where my ideals lie, and that it was a place where like these things I didn't need. need. Relish in my sobriety. I enjoy being in a state of unaltered consciousness. Everything that I've written in my life has been written in a state of being sober. I've never been on anything. I've never been influenced by anything. In this moment when I was here, I was like, damn, dude, Madarame would never do this shit. Made me reconsider a couple things. And now I'm going to turn on the fucking air conditioning because I'm sweating my balls off. Holy shit, I feel disgusting. And this has gone on far enough. I'm going to have to edit some of this out. It's like 35 minutes right now. Yeah, don't do drugs, kids. And if you do, know exactly what the fuck you're getting into. And even if you do know what the fuck you're getting into, you don't know shit. You don't know shit.